Support comes from Mosby Building Arts, on a mission to create remodeling experiences worthy of 5-star online reviews. See the difference at callmosby.com.
This is St. Louis on the Air from St. Louis Public Radio. I'm Elaine Cha. For some months in late 2024 and early 2025, the St. Charles County Library District had no permanent CEO. What it did have was a certain history. The district made headlines for controversy over book bans, for instance, and for community outcry over a plan to close several library branches to make up for a budget deficit. So when John Greifzu took the helm as the district CEO 1 year ago, he set about to turn the page on those challenges and to start a new chapter for the St. Charles County Library District and the community it serves. STLPR morning newscaster and Gateway podcast host Abby Llorico recently sat down with Greifzu to hear where the district stands 1 year into his tenure, and she joins us now to talk about that exchange. Abby, great to have you on the show again.
Always, Elaine.
So we've talked on the show about your St. Charles connections in the past, and I'd like to know, what is it that interested you in this story? Were you a St. Charles library kid?
Oh, yeah, through and through. Catherine Linneman branch, baby. And since I have to talk about food on this podcast, right down the street from Lyons Frozen Custard, would go once a week as a kid, right? But libraries in general, they're such community hubs. They're so personal. So many of us have those memories, those stories, the reasons we access the library. And really, they're at the intersection of so many different issues we talk about in the news and as people in society. Literacy, access to social services, tax funding, culture wars, and St. Charles is a bit of a hotbed.
Mm-hmm. So when John Greifzu stepped into the CEO role, why was it a big moment?
It was actually a pretty crowded candidate field to replace Jason Kuhl when he left for a library district in Oklahoma. As you mentioned at the top of the segment, Elaine, a couple months passed before they found a replacement. The board selected someone without a lot of experience beyond the stacks hanging out as a patron, like so many of us. John Greifzu's background is predominantly in transportation, infrastructure. He's most recently served in county administration as a books and numbers and operations guy. So people had some questions and people wanted to see how he would take over a library with so many library-specific issues. Mm-hmm.
So you'd mentioned what Greifzu's professional background was. When he took up the mantle of leading St. Charles County's library district in early 2025, what kind of financial situation did he inherit? And did he come in really specifically to fix those?
It was a district situated, Elaine, on a cliff. That's how the previous leadership described it. The former CEO said it would be irresponsible to not make some significant changes. And Greifzu actually told me that was one of the things that was most compelling to him about this particular role, was to see how to essentially right the ship. A plan was pitched by the previous CEO to close 3 of the library's 11 branches. This was partially because of a shift in how the administration wanted to prioritize resources, putting more into busier branches and e-materials, which are more expensive, actually. Some people are surprised by that. But this led to a lot of protests and a lot of public outcry. And so Greifzu was very clear-eyed about the challenges that he would face. And so hitting the books in the financial books was going to, he knew, be a big part of that role.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the problems, Abby, that the district faces now, particularly around those budget issues a year after Greifzu's come in?
I will say that the idea of closing branches is off the table for now. So that's something that's important to note because library administration says they still get that question from folks. However, they have had to make some cuts. They've laid off about 15% of the staff in the last year. They've also had to reduce their materials budget by about 9%. And Greifzu says they're also cutting costs where they can in their capital spending. Again, Greifzu is a numbers guy. He says the library needs more money to serve this expanding population. St. Charles County has nearly doubled since 1994 in its population. And 1994 is the last time the library requested an increase on its tax levy. So they are having to do a lot more for a lot of people based on an old number.
Yeah. So, Abby, as I understand, St. Charles County residents are wealthier on average than those in neighboring communities, and the library is largely funded by local property taxes. Yet even in one of the fastest growing areas of the region, as you've mentioned, it's slowly losing that source of economic support. Here's what St. Charles County Library District CEO John Greifzu had to say about the situation.
Our current model is under attack. It's a slow defunding of our system. And each year we're holding stable, but we're slowly having erosion at our revenues that make it harder and harder each year. We've done a lot of things with less, but is there more than we can do? Most certainly. We're hoping that the public eventually will find it that they'd like to support the library and offer us additional revenue. But if that does not happen, we are prepared to continue to offer great services within the branches and the locations that we have.
So, Abby, why is there such a disparity between average wealth and funding?
It gets a bit wonky here, so I'll try to explain it in a broad sense, Elaine. There are a few funding mechanisms that are kind of poking holes at the bottom line. The senior property tax freeze. It's something that helps keep older residents in an area stay in their homes rather than being taxed out of them as the valuation of their communities rises. That's in effect in St. Charles, but Greifzu says that senior property tax freeze alone cost the library an equivalent of 3 full-time employees last year in funding. In April, Prop RT will be on the ballot in St. Charles County. That would essentially expand that property tax freeze to other homeowners in St. Charles County, where, yes, the property values do continue to rise, but it would freeze those rates. And the library estimates that could cost the library district about $600,000 in the first year alone. And then I'll also quickly mention the Hancock Amendment, which is something that the library is governed by, taxing bodies in the state of Missouri are governed by. And it essentially puts a ceiling on the amount of revenue that governments can collect. So even though property values have risen, more people are coming into St. Charles County, the library can only take a certain amount of funding, so it's actually had to roll its levy back because of that. Mm-hmm. It's wonky, but it essentially says that there's a ceiling here, and it's getting more and more crowded under the ceiling.
Yeah. And as we're talking about library stacks, we're also talking about stacks of cash that are not coming in to fund. St. Charles County has been a battleground for culture wars, and you've mentioned this earlier, involving book bans and attire for employees. And the library fielded an increase in requests to pull titles off shelves in recent years, with most of those requests targeting books with LGBTQ themes. So in late 2025, the district adopted a new policy around book challenges aligned with the American Library Association standards. Abby, what can you tell us about that process?
So this essentially involves a committee of staffers being formed when a library patron, who has to be someone who has a St. Charles City County Library card, resident there, if they file a formal complaint, fill out the questionnaire, a committee of staffers, including librarians, is formed to respond to this complaint challenge request. If that library card holder wants to appeal the decision that is made, they can do so to the library board of trustees, which is not it's not librarians, all professional librarians. And so that's what caused a lot of issue from the public, is who is this library of trustees board that gets the final word on things like book bans. And it is the final word because whatever they decide is the decision for at least 2 years before it can be challenged again. They say that this is actually just essentially codifying what's always been policy. You can appeal anything, they say, to the Board of Trustees. This just kind of puts it in standard there. And he says it will kind of make it more transparent for people what the process actually is. And since this new policy has been adopted, they've not removed any materials.
Mm-hmm. Now, Greifzu said that this process will make room for patrons to explore a breadth of subjects through a variety of materials that promote learning and appreciation.
We have materials within our collection to help anyone that has kind of a desire to learn more. We're hoping that we have a broad enough collection that we can help people learn and explore those topics. So that is one of our fundamental goals. Does that mean that some of the items that we have in our collection may offend certain groups? Certainly. I think one of the things that I kind of joke with our staff is that we have our goal should be that we have a broad enough collection and enough materials that we're going to offend a little bit, almost everyone. One way or another, we're going to offend everybody. And that's okay, because that shows that our collection has that depth within it to have the materials, and people are coming in to explore. What I really hope for this organization, and I kind of mentioned this to staff, is that I hope that the library can kind of be that spot where we as a community can come in and celebrate our differences.
Now, just yesterday, Abby, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch published an article about the St. Charles County Library District ordering its employees to clear workspaces of any decor which includes LGBTQ flags that promote personal beliefs. So the bulk of the conversation we've just had has to do with the interview that you had with CEO John Greifzu some time ago. This is before yesterday's Post-Dispatch piece, but you had a chance to speak with Greifzu this morning about this recent news. What did you learn from that conversation?
Yeah, just a week ago, he was saying that this is a place where pretty much anybody should be able to come in and find a way to be offended. And then yesterday we have this news about an employee being told to take down an LGBTQ pride flag. I spoke with him about it this morning. He says that this stemmed from a branch manager newly assigned to a location after kind of reshuffling of some employees, seeing an employee's pride flag in their office space, which was public facing, reminding them of existing policy that items cannot be displayed that are political or personal belief in nature. He sent me and I reviewed the Employee Code of Ethics, which has been in place since 2018. According to library administration, this has been used once before to remove an employee's pride flag from their workspace. John says it's up to the library staff to remain neutral, to present neutral, to kind of give be like human safe spaces for people with a variety of perspectives. I challenged him on the concept of sexuality or gender identity being political in nature, to which he agreed, but he also said they need to recognize that there are people with a variety of personal beliefs, and the best way to kind of go about this, that they know how to do at least, is to remind employees to present neutral.
Mm-hmm. So given all that we've talked about, Abby, and now that John Greifzu has been in this position for a year, what does he see as his biggest priorities moving forward?
He's a books and numbers guy. He really doesn't want to wade into these culture war issues. And because of that, he says that looking at these numbers, they need to be higher for St. Charles City County Library. When you look at the growth that's been experienced in the area since 1994, it is a totally different map. And so he knows that it will require an increase in revenue in the near future. Right now, there is nothing on the ballot. However, Greifzu says that it's going to be continuously important for them at the library to keep up with this outreach and remind people who they are, what they do, and what they're there for, so that they can make a case in the coming years to ask library patrons, to ask the city, county for more money to do their jobs.
Abby Llorico is STLPR's morning newscaster and host of the Gateway podcast. You can read her work at our website. That's STLPR.org. Abby, thanks for joining us today.
Always, Elaine. Thanks.
This episode was produced by Lila Halal-Bashich. Production assistance from Darius Barner.
Audio engineering and sound design by Aaron Dorr.
Our executive producer is Alex Hoyer.
St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio. Understanding starts here.
Do you find yourself regularly listening to episodes of St. Louis on the Air? Suggest us to a friend you think might enjoy our conversations. And leave us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the simplest way to help people discover our show. Thanks.
St. Louis Public Radio is a member-supported service of the University of Missouri St. Louis.
The Gateway brings you the day's news each weekday from around the St. Louis region and the state capitals in Jefferson City.
Our schools are accredited. We don't need this bill.
And Springfield.
How many more years must pass before lawmakers see time is of the essence?
I'm Abby Llorico. Join me each weekday for The Gateway on the STLPR app or wherever you get podcasts.